Good afternoon. We are the group 1 from BSSW-1A, and this is our group report. Our topic is all about feminist theories, Gilligan and other feminist theories. And our learning outcomes is to know and understand the different types of feminist theories and their standpoint. And this is our learning resources. Before we start, we have prepared motivational quotes from Luke Easter, and it says, "A strong woman knows she has strength enough for the journey, but a woman of strength knows that it is in the journey where she will become strong." So a strong woman knows that she has a strength, but a woman of strength knows that it is in the journey where she will become stronger, because it is in our experiences, in our journey, that we become more strong, we become empowered because of the experiences that we have and the learnings that we learn from all that experiences, and that makes us stronger and empowered women, because we experience the difficulties and we victoriously we surpass all those challenges and throughout our missions, and that makes us a strong woman. So to start, many people incorrectly believe that feminist theory focuses exclusively on girls and women, and that it has an inherent goal of promoting the superiority of women over men. So there's this misconception when we say that feminist theory only focuses and believes on the studies of girls, the right of the women's, and promoting the superiority of men over superiority of women over men. But in fact, the reality, feminist theory has always been about viewing the social world in a way that illuminates the forces that create and support inequality, oppression, and injustice, and in doing so promotes the pursuit of equality and injustice. When we say illuminates the forces that create and support inequality, means nagbibigay ng linaw, no, and nagbibigay linaw of that force that create and support inequality and oppressions and injustice. Kasi nga women are less before, women has a less of opportunity than men, because they believe, culturally believe that women are weak and they are more productive when they are at home, or they stay at home, and men has this more, they have that more ability and capacity to work than women, no. That is why feminist theories, they view the social world in a way that illuminates the forces and creates support inequality, oppressions, and injustice. Kasi there's injustice because only men has a given opportunity when it comes to political powers, na economic participations. And when we, in doing so, it promotes the pursuit of equality, yung pagkapantay-pantay, at yung mabigyan ng justisya na as women also has the right and ability, the capacity also to do what men can do. So, feminist theory also explores both inequality in gender relations and the constitution of gender. So, pinag-aaralan din dito yung para yung hindi pagkapantay-patay sa relasyon ng kasarian at ang konstitusyon ng kasarian. And it is best understood as both an intellectual and normative project. Yung pinag-aaralan din na para mas maintindihan natin, not only in on how we think of it or how we see it intellectually, but also in a normative way na mas nakikita at mas na-justify na mas klaro, no? What is commonly understood as feminist theory is accompanied the feminist movement in the mid-70s. No? So, doon nagsimula yung theory about women, about this feminist theory. Through there are cathetics from the 19th and to the early 20th centuries that represent early feminist thought. So, in this year, nakita na nila na there's also women that can also run not just sa loob lang na bahay yung napapatakbo nila, but economically and politically women can also run. So in the early 90s and the mid 20s, meron ng mga signs, lalo na yung pinalabas ni Karl Marx yung theory niya sa yung theory niya about capitalism. So doon nag-start yung thought about feminine theories. So, whereas feminist theories first began an attempt to explain women's oppression globally, following a grand theoretical approach in Marxism. So, nung time in the mid-90s and in the early 90s to mid-20s, no, there's this women repression na sinasabi nila yung pang-aakape na sinasabi ni Karl Marx dun sa theory niya, doon lumabas yung oppression when it comes to women, oppression women's globally, following a grand theoretical approach into Marxism. The questions and emphasis in the field have undergone some major shift. So after that, nakita nila na there's this oppression, when you say oppression, pang-aapi, not physically but the rights of the women, so they divide it into two parts, number one, from universalizing to particularizing and contextualizing women's experiences, yung ginalantaw nila how women experiences in a universal vision to particular to the context na ginagawa ng mga babae, from bigger picture to the medium picture hanggang sa nung maliit na picture, so from maliit na picture of men and women as the category, from that picture, doon nag-start na mas naging klaro, from conceptualizing men and women as categories and focusing on the category of women to questioning the content of that category. So, kumbaga, mas nilagyan nila ng laman yung category when it comes to women. And moving to the exploration of gender practices. Ano ba yung mga ginagawa ng mga babae, even na nasa bahay sila, they are productive, they can do multitasking jobs. So, that is why, na-explore that this thought began na women can also do more, and also women can do something, lalo na when it comes to political and economic contributions. Yun yung theory na meron si Karl Marx, and later on we will discover more and learn more about the theories and other theories when it comes to feminine theory. So now we're going to explore more about feminist theories. But before that, we need to know what are the models of the feminist theories. And after that, we're going to explore more different feminist theories and their standpoint. So let's start.
Good day, I am Carla S. Agustin from BSSW-1A of Group 1. So I will be discussing about the model of feminist theory. So before I continue, I would like to discuss what theory is. Because we are talking about theory, the feminist theory. So I would like to discuss what theory is first. So based on what we have researched, theory is an international peer-reviewed journal that provides a forum for critical analysis, and constructive debate within feminism. So it's like an ideas, views, and beliefs that are discussing about feminism. So this theory is only focuses on feminism. So feminist theory genuinely interdisciplinary and reflects the diversity of feminism, incorporating perspective from across the board spectrum of the humanities and social sciences and the full range of feminism. So, when you listened on the introduction of our report, it was said that it is about viewing the social world in a way that illuminates the forces that create and support inequality. So, as it was said, feminist theory reflects of view the uniqueness of feminism and try to fixes the inequality for the one who supports it. So, in figure 1 represents a model of feminist theory that begins with the belief that system exists that oppress and work against individuals. So the model then shows that oppression is based on intersecting identities that can create discrimination and exclusion and indicates the idea that through knowledge and action, oppressive system can be disrupted to support change and understanding. So in the figure shown, it was shown that the system and structure of power exists in order to work against the sex, gender, equality, race, and etc. So, when this happens, it creates discrimination, confusion, and chaos. So, in order to stop this, they made an action. So, through action, power are acknowledged and disrupted. And by this action, it supports and creates understanding, advocacy, and change. So next is I will be discussing about the concepts, constructs, proposition, gender difference, gender inequality, gender oppression, and lastly is structural oppression in feminist theory. So, first is concept. The core concept in feminist theory are sex, gender, race, discrimination, equality, differences, and choice. There are system and structure in place that work against individuals based on these qualities and against equality and equity. Research believe that through the exploration of these existing conditions in the current social order, truths can be revealed. And more important, this exploration can build awareness of oppressive systems and create spaces for diverse voices to speak for themselves, according to Egbert and Sadden in 2019. So next is constructs. Feminism is concerned with the constructs of intersectionality, dimension of social life, social inequality, and social transformation. Men and women should be politically, economically, and social equal, and this theory does not subscribe to differences or similarities between men, nor does it refer to excluding men or only furthering women causes. So, feminist theory works to support change and understanding through acknowledging and disrupting power and oppression. So next is proposition. Feminist theory proposes that when power and oppression are acknowledged and disrupted, understanding, advocacy, and change can occur. So, feminist research is interested in disrupting system of oppression or barriers created from this system with a goal of creating change. All research can include feminist theory when the research adds the effort to work against and advocate to eliminate the power and oppression that exists within systems or structures that in particular oppress women. So next is gender differences. Some feminist theory provide an analytic framework for understanding how women's location in and experience of social situation differ from men's. So, for example, cultural feminists look at the different value associated with womanhood and femininity. Other feminist theories believe that the different roles assigned to women and men within institutions better explain gender differences. Existential feminists focus on how women have been marginalized and defined as others in patriarchal societies. Some feminist theories focus specifically on how masculinity is developed through socialization and how its development interacts with the process of developing femininity in girls. So next is gender inequality. So feminist theories that focuses on gender inequality recognize that women experience of social situation are not only different but also unequal to men's. So liberal feminists argue that women have the same capacity as men for moral reasoning and agency, but that patriarchy has historically denied women the opportunity to express and practice this reasoning. So, this shoved women into the private sphere of the household and to exclude them from the full participation of public life. Liberal feminists point out that gender inequality exists for women in heterosexual marriage and that women do not benefit from being married. Therefore, the sexual dimension of labor in both the public and private sphere needs to be altered for women to achieve equality in marriage. So next is gender oppression. Theories of gender oppression go farther than theories of gender that not only are women different from or unequal to men, but that they are actively oppressed, subordinated men. Power is the key variable in the two main theories of gender oppression, psychoanalytic and feminist. So, psychoanalytic feminists attempt to explain power relation between men and women by reformulating Sigmund Freud's theories. They believe that conscious calculation cannot fully explain the production and reproduction of patriarchy. Radical feminists argue that being a woman is a positive thing in and of itself, but that this is not acknowledged in patriarchal societies where women are oppressed. They identified physical violence as being at the base of patriarchy, but they think that patriarchy can be defeated if women recognize their own value and strength, establish a sisterhood of trust with other women, confront oppression critically, and form female-based separatist networks in public and private spheres. And lastly, structural oppression. So, structural oppression theories posit that women's oppression and inequality are a result of capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. Socialist feminism agree with Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels that the working class is exploited as a consequences of capitalism, but they seek to extend this exploitation not just to class but also to gender. Intersectionality theory seeks to explain oppression and inequality across a variety of variables, including class, gender, race, ethnicity, and age. One way structural oppression of women is physically the economic kind. So that would be all. Thank you for listening. God bless.
Liberalism. Liberalism, political doctrine that takes protecting and enhancing the freedom of individual to be the central problem of politics. So, ito yung karaniwang naniniwala ang mga liberal na ang gobyerno ay kailangan para protektahan ang mga individual mula sa pananakit ng iba. So it shows that the liberal are believing to the government to protect everyone, especially for those people who get harmed. Next, as the revolutionary American pamphleteer Thomas Paine expressed it in common Since 1776, government is at best a necessary evil. Law, judges, and police are needed to secure the individual's life and liberty, but their coercive power may also be turned against him. So, the problem is the problem is doing system that gives power to the government to protect individual freedom. Ngunit pinipigilan din ng mga namamahala sa pinipigilan din ang mga namamahala sa pag-aabuso ng kapangyarihang iyon. Next, the problem is compounded when one asks whether this is all that government can, should, or do on behalf of individual. Some liberals, so-called neoclassical liberals or libertarian, answers that it is. Since late 19th century, however, most liberals have insisted that the powers of government can promote as well as protect the freedom of the individual. Such obstacles include poverty, disease, discrimination, and ignorance. So, according to the modern liberalism, the first thing to do with the system is to remove all the things that stop the individual to live freely and fully realizing their potential. Next, in the United States, liberalism is associated with the welfare state policies of the New Deal program of the Democratic administration of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, whereas in Europe, it is more commonly associated with a commitment to limited government and laissez-faire economic policies. Montagu Kenneth, Gervitz, Harike, Ball, Terence, and Dagger, Richard liberalism. Next, liberal feminism believes in pragmatic reform against gender discrimination through the promotion of equal rights by engaging and formulating laws and policies that will ensure equality. So, naniniwala ang liberal na feminismo sa pragmatic na reforma laban sa diskriminasyon sa kasarian. Just like our society today, the LGBTQ community na minsan ay diniscriminate ng ating kapwa. So like liberal feminism, they promote the equal right by engaging and formulating laws and policies na makakatiyak na ng pagkapantay-pantay. Next, liberal feminism believe that female subordination is noted in a set of customary and legal constraints that blocks women's entrance to and success in the so-called public world and strive for gender equality via political and legal reform. Liberal feminism has a more individualistic approach to justice than left-wing branches of feminism such as socialist or radical feminism. So, in short, the liberal feminism, ito yung nagsusulong ng ng kalayaan ng individual para mabuhay ng malaya at ma-realize nila yung kanilang potential. And also, the liberal feminism promote the equal right. So, tayong lahat ay may pantay-pantay na karapatan para mabuhay na malaya.
Good day everyone, I'm Rovjin Tibunita and my topic is Marxism. So what is Marxism? To define Marxism in simple terms, it is a political and economic theory where a society has no classes. Every person within the society works for a common good, and class struggle is theoretical gone. Marxism is the name of a set of political and economic ideas. The basic ideas are that the world is split into multiple classes, group of people. The two main classes are the working class and the ruling class. So Marxism is a body of doctrine developed by Karl Marx and to a lesser extent by Friedrich Engels in the middle of 19th century. It originally consisted of three related ideas. So the first is a philosophical anthropology. it developed as a critic and alternative to the domination of Euro-American capitalism and Eurocentric perspectives in the social sciences. So the second one is a theory of history, which argued that human societies and their cultural institutions like religion, law, morality, and etc. were the outgrowth of collective economic activities. And lastly, an economic and political program, which it examines the effect of capitalism on labor, productivity, and the economic development that argues for a worker revolution to overturn capitalism in favor of communism. So Marx's theory recognizes a tension between the demands of capitalist accumulation and the requirements of social reproduction. Accumulation of profit requires some displacements of costs outside the economic accounting of capitalism to parts of a natural world that have not been valorized to future generation and to particular places. In geographic terms, this distinction is manifested in capital search for increased profit through first is vital division of labor and make use of low-cost location for low-valued added activities, and the second one is a continuous redeployment to more profitable, typically low-cost location. The resultant spiral and the temporal unevenness of economic development is problematic for people and social institutions that are attached to particular places. Marxism justifies and predicts the emergence of a stateless and classless society without private property. That vaguely socialist society, however, could be preceded by the violent seizure of the state and the means of production by the proletariat who could rule in the interim dictatorship. Meanwhile, China adopted many elements of a free market economy in what it called development rather than a reproduction of Marxism theory. In the West, Marxism continues to be appreciated as a critic of market capitalism and the theory of historical changes. Marxism's social work under capitalism is not always recognized as such because the threat Marxism possessed to the capitalist states means social workers may jeopardize their employment by openly declaring their Marxism. Other Marxist practices is simply never written about, and this is particularly likely when practice occurs within non-professional settings. Although social work academics often have greater freedom than practitioners, there has still been a tendency to avoid explicitly discussing Marx's influences.
So, socialism. Social and economic doctrines that calls for public rather than a private ownership or control of property and natural resources. According to the socialist view, individuals do not live or work in isolation but live in cooperation with one another. Further, everything that people produce is in some sense a social product, and everyone who contributes to the production of a goods is entitled to be share in it. So, society as a whole therefore should own or at least control poverty for the benefits of all its members. So, ang socialism di ay doctrines nga ginatawag nato nga public. And then, ang socialism pod is live in cooperation with one another. Then, and everyone who contributes to the production of a good will be entitled to share in it. It because socialism should own or at least control poverty for the benefits of all its members. This conviction puts socialism in opposition to capitalism. So, which is based on private ownership of the means of productions and allow individuals choices in a free market to determine how goods and services are distributed. So, ang socialist complain that capitalism is necessarily leads to unfair and exploitative concentrations of wealth and power to the hands of the relatives few who emerge victorious from pre-market competition. So people who tend to use their wealth and power to reinforce their dominance in society. Yes, it's true. Sometimes capitalism is necessarily leads to unfair because such people are such people are rich and they may choose where and how to live and their choices in turn limits to the option of the poor. Example for this is katong pandemic dahil sa dahil sa COVID-19, and then our LGUs here is declaring that um, all people of this community nga mamalit na daw una-una kay kanang para dili na magsige gawas-gawas, and then that time the advantage for the rich is naa sila'y kwarta daan, and then they can go to the stores, buy everything that they want, and wala sila'y gina-limit nga ang store ato nga time is wala sila ginalimit ato nga pilay paliton sa tao. But in the end, kay na limited stock naman to siya tungod kay ang uban lagi daghan kayo ginapalit kay tungod kay naa sila'y money daan, and then some people kasi is kanang ga-work ramang good sa kanang lowest salary, and then ga-wait pud sila kanang sa magsweldo mo tong time nga ayha pa din sila nakapangumpra pag pag nakasweldo sila, and then that time is kanang ang store dayon nag-declare na dayon nga only 5 cans allowed sa isa ka person kay para daw maka-contribute pa sa uban or ma-share pa. That's why sometimes capitalism is unfair. So as socialists see it, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels made his point in Manifesto of the Communist Party 1848, and then when they proclaimed that in a socialist society, the condition for the free development of each is the free development of all. So again, socialism is a system of social organization in which private property and the distribution of income are subject to social control. So also the political movements aim to putting that system into practice, because social control may be interpreted in widely deranging ways, and socialism range from statist to liberalism, from Marxist to liberal. The term was first used to describe the doctrines of Charles Fourier, Henry de Saint-Simon, and Robert Owen, who emphasized non-coercive communities of people working non-competitively for the spiritual and physical well-being of all. So, in Then Karl Marx and si Friedrich Engels seeing socialism as a transition state between capitalism and communication, appropriated what they found useful of socialist movements to develop their scientific socialism. So, in the 20th century, the Soviet Union was the principal model of strictly centralized socialism, while Sweden and Denmark were well known for their non-communist socialism.
Waves of feminism. The modern day humanist movement has embraced feminism, but like various types of humanism, the tension between the various waves of feminism is ever present. Established feminist movement within the United States have primarily fallen into four different times period. The different movements, often termed first wave, second wave, third wave, and fourth wave feminism, share similar goals but different characteristics of actions. These various waves of feminism are interwoven into women's rights, civil rights, and social justice movements. What has especially characterized these movements is the championing of equality under the law and within our socio-economic structures. That said, the difference and the existing tension among these various waves outlines an important question. What kind of equality does feminism seek? And the waves of feminism are not a linear progression and consensus of progress, even though they roughly follow a linear timeline. Instead, they are intense changes of perspective among different generations of women. So the first wave feminism. During the late 19th century, it is primarily characterized by the women's suffrage movement and their championing of the women's right to vote. While many continue to celebrate feminist leaders like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth K. D. Stanton, the women's suffrage movement are largely excluded and discriminated against women of color, including suffragettes such as Ida B. Wells, Ellen Watkins Harper, and Sojourner Truth. White women were eventually guaranteed the right to vote in 1920 under the 19th Amendment. Women of color wouldn't have the universal right to vote until 45 years later with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, when all people of color were guaranteed the right to vote. Second wave feminism, from roughly the 1960s to the 1990s, encompassed far more issues such as pay equality, reproductive rights, female sexuality, and domestic violence. Like the first wave of feminism, many of these goals were achieved through legislation and important court decisions. That said, while the second wave movement made some attempts to encompass racial injustice, it remained a lesser priority than gender. Class and race were viewed as secondary issue. If they were considered at all, the disparities between white women and white men narrowed, but the inequity between women of color and white men, or even between women of color and white women, largely remained the same. Third wave feminism emerged from the mid-1990s, challenging female heteronormativity. The third wavers suit to redefine femininity and suit to celebrate differences across race, class, and sexual orientations, while third wave feminists support feminism. They reject many stereotypes of feminine ideal, sometimes even rejecting the word feminism itself. This movement was a stark departure from the second wave, and the development of intersectionality began to take form. The term intersectionality was coined by lawyer and activist Kimberly Crenshaw to describe how race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics or intersect with one another and overlap. And lastly, the fourth wave feminism. It is newly emerging over the last decade or so, therefore it's difficult to define. That said, fourth wave feminism is seen as characterized by action-based viral campaigns, protests, and movements like #MeToo, advancing from the fringes of society into the headlines of our everyday news. The fourth wave has also been characterized as queer, sex positive, trans inclusive, body positive, and digitally driven. It seeks to further deconstruct gender norms. The problem these feminists confront is systematic white male supremacy. Fourth wavers believe there is no feminism without an understanding of comprehensive justice that deconstructs a system of power and includes emphasis on racial justice as well as examination of class, disability, and other issues.
I am Divine A. Kaga from Group 1 and I will be reporting about Carol Gilligan feminist theory. Carol Gilligan is a psychologist best known for her innovative views on the development of women's morality and sense of self. Gilligan emphasized what she called an ethics of care in women's moral reasoning. Carol Gilligan is an American feminist, ethicist, and psychologist, best known for her work on ethical community and ethical relationships. Gilligan developed her ideas in response to the theory of moral development proposed by Lawrence Kohlberg, which she criticized for ignoring women's perspective. Gilligan proposed that women come to prioritize an ethics of care as their sense of morality evolves along with their sense of self, while men prioritize an ethics of justice. This article discusses the history of Gilligan's theory. There are three Gilligan stages of moral development. Gilligan's theory focused on both care-based morality and justice-based morality by proposing three conventional, post-conventional, and pre-conventional. Gilligan's theory used the same basic three-level outline as Kohlberg's. First, pre-conventional morality. Moral judgment is entirely focused on the self and the need to survive. When conflict arises between the needs of the self and the needs of others, this morality is externally controlled. Rules imposed by authority figure are conformed in order to avoid punishment or received awards. This perspective evolves the idea that what is right, what one can get away with, or what is personality satisfying. Second is conventional morality. Moral judgment becomes concentrated on caring for others. Conventional morality is characterized by an acceptance of society's conventions concerning the right and the wrong. At this level, an individual obeys rules and follows society's norms even when there are no consequences for obedience or disobedience. I have example about conventional morality. I better not drink and drive because my friends will mm, think less of me, and I, in turn, will think less of myself. Third, post-conventional morality. Moral is judgment dictated by the principle of nonviolence. Post-conventional morality, reasoning can be seen throughout society. The needs of the self are just as important as the needs of others, which causes the woman to arrive at a universal ethic of care and concern. The most The post-conventional morality is the highest stage of morality in Kohlberg's model, in which individuals have developed their own personal set of ethics and moral that they use to drive their behavior. The ethics of care and developing sense of self. The ethics of care, also called care ethics, feminist philosophical perspective that uses a relational and context-bound approach towards morality and decision making. The term ethics of care refers to ideas concerning both the nature of morality and normative ethical theory. Gilligan's stages of moral development hinges on an evolving sense of self. At the pre-conventional level, only the needs of the self are recognized. At the conventional level, the needs of others are prioritized while the needs of the self are denied. At the post-conventional level, a balance is struck between the needs of the self and others. Women prioritized an ethics of care, where morality is centered on interpersonal relationships and moral judgment. Transition through this levels is based on a woman's reconsideration of what she considers selfish. Throughout this throughout these levels, woman's sense of self and the sense of morality that arises because of it are driven by their feelings of connection and responsibility towards other with gradually evolve to encompass others and then expand to encompass everyone including the self. And that's all for today. Thank you.
Feminist standpoint theory is a theory that feminist social science should be practiced from the standpoint of women or particular groups of women. Feminist standpoint theories place relations between political and social power and knowledge center stage. So, what is feminist standpoint theory? It aims to acknowledge the diversity of women by welcoming the views of other people, oppressed groups of women. Feminist standpoint theory focuses on the intersection of everyday practices of exercising power and the production of knowledge. 3K claims. Number 1. Whatever knowledge that we're able to obtain is socially suited. In feminist standpoint theory, whatever knowledge that we learn or obtain, it was marked as socially suited. Number 2. People who are part of marginalized group are socially situated in a way that makes them more aware of present circumstances, allowing them to ask questions that have more value. In a feminist standpoint theory, marginalized group is socially suited, but it have to make them aware the present circumstances and the question should be more valuable to the other people.
Number 3. Research must therefore begin with those who are living their lives with a group that is marginalized. Ang pananaliksik ay dapat magsimula sa mga nabubuhay sa loob ng isang grupo ng marginalized. Marxist standpoint theory. The theory emerged from the Marxist argument that people from an oppressed class have special access to knowledge that is available to those from a privileged class. In the 1970s, feminist writers inspired by that Marxist insight began to examine how inequalities between men and women influence knowledge production. The epistemic advantage of standpoint of the proletariat is also thus grounded in the epistemic privilege autonomous agents have over what they are consciously doing. This theory emerged that Marxist theory that people that have a special access about the knowledge but it didn't use to have on a privileged class. Ground of feminist standpoint theory. Feminist standpoint theory claims that the standpoint of women has an epistemic advantage over phenomena in which gender is implicated, relative to the theories that make sexist or androcentric assumptions. This theory emerged from the Marxist theory that people that have a special access about the knowledge but it didn't use to have a privileged class. Strands of Marxist centrality. Focus on women's centrality to the system of reproduction, of child rearing and caring for bodies, because women tend to the needs of everyone in the household. They are in a better position, can ignore how patriarchy undermines subordinates' interests. So, centrality is the women are focusing about the reproduction of child rearing and of being caring of their bodies. Women are having an ability to be the leader of the house because they are maybe in a better position. They may be perfect in their works. Collective self consciousness. Mackinnon in 1989 argues that men constitute women as the bisexually objectifying them by representing their natures as essentially sexually subordinate to men and treating them accordingly. According to Mackinnon, all men should be paired by women because it was our nature to be essentially sexually subordinate by men.
Good day everyone, I am Eljimay Cabeltes and this is a continuation of Ms. Abrigo's discussion about the grounds of standpoint theory under the feminist standpoint theory. Cognitive style. Some early versions of standpoint theory accept feminist object relations theory, which explains how male and female children raised by female caregivers develop gender identity. Males develop a masculine identity by differentiating themselves from their mothers or by controlling and demeaning the feminine, while females acquire their gender identity through identification with their mothers or blurring the boundaries between self and other. These cognitive styles are reinforced by the gender division of labor, men having a near monopoly on positions of political, economic, and military power, calling for detachment and control, and women being assigned to emotional care for others. The masculine cognitive style is abstract, theoretical, emotionally detached, atomistic, and oriented toward control or domination, while the feminine cognitive style is concrete, practical, emotionally engaged, relational, and oriented toward care. Oppression. Radical feminists argued that the root cause of women's inequality is patriarchy, that men as a group oppress women. Feminists fight against the oppression of women, and women have been unjustly held back from achieving full equality for much of human history in many societies around the world. That is why women have interest in representing social phenomena in ways that reveal their oppression. They also have personal experience of sexist oppression. Kadalasan sa ating mga babae, lagi tayong dinidiscriminate ng mga lalaki. Sinasabi nila, babae lang tayo, o hindi mo yan kaya, or ito lang ang kaya mo, or ganito ka lang kasi babae ka lang. That is why feminists and feminism exist, to put an end to sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression, and to achieve full gender equality in law and in practice. Access to the feminist standpoint. Every standpoint theory must explain how one gains access to it. So most standpoint theories represent the epistemically advantaged standpoint not as given but as achieved through critical reflection on the power structures constituting group identities. If the group and its interests are defined objectively, the facts that constitute the group and its interests are publicly accessible. So these are the goals of feminist standpoint theory. Feminist standpoint theory is a type of critical theory which aims to empower the oppressed. Every woman should have the freedom to make her own choices and claim her rights. Next is to represent the world in relation to the interests of the oppressed. We women should make some noise about the issues and enable the oppressed to understand their problems, and lastly, be usable by the oppressed to improve their condition. Call others out there when they make insensitive or ill-informed comments and help amplify the voices of women on the front lines. Let us remember, guys, that prejudice and racism are learned behaviors, therefore, they can be unlearned. Criticisms of feminist standpoint theory. Longino on 1993 argues that standpoint theory cannot provide a non-circular basis for deciding which standpoints have epistemic privilege. Crenshaw in 1999 argues that it is implausible to hold that any group inequality is central to all the others. They intersect in complex ways. Hence, women cannot have privileged access to understanding their oppression since this takes different forms for different women depending on their race, sexual orientation, and other identities.
Thus, while other theories do focuses on the questions of how gender inequality manifests in the institutions such as work, home place, armed forces, economy, or public sphere, other theories or other explore the range of practices that have come to be defined as masculine or feminine, and how gender is constituted in relation to other social relations. So while other theories questioning ano ba talaga yung gender inequality na nabubuo ngayon sa ating lipunan, no, just as our homes, our workplaces, no, in the armed forces, no, economy, or even in public sphere. Yung ibang theories naman, they explore the range of practices that have come to define, such as what is masculine or feminine, and how gender is constituted, no, in relation to other social relations. So ano pa ba yung mga iba't ibang activities or iba't ibang relations na meron sa community natin ngayon o sa paligid natin that involves women rights or women participations, no? In more so in questioning, they also have studies or exploration on how women can be more explore, no, to be given a lot of opportunities when it comes to gender equality. Feminist theories can thus be used to explain on how institution operates with normative gendered assumption and selectively reward or punish gender practices. So right now, they use this theories on how they're going to run, no, how to they're going to explain the operations of what this theories is all about, no, ano ba yung general assumption niya and this theories, no, and others put rewards in their discoveries, while others are making laws on how to punish, no, the established laws to how to punish these people who look down women, no, or look down our friends, no, and our friends in the community, the LGBTQs, no, because we are all given the same opportunities, and respect is what we need, no. And many contemporary feminists look beyond the United States, no, yung mga modern feminists, they really look forward in the United States because this country, this shows the really strong agenda when it comes to feminist theories, the gender equality. So they focus on the effects of not only in local, no, but also transnational economic, political, cultural linkages on shaping gender. So they try to put everything into normal and practice the level of equality no matter what is your gender, no, whether you are men or women, or whatever level you are leveling yourself, you are given the chance, or you have the rights to explore and to express yourself without any judgment. So that's what feminist choice is all about. Thank you. So for our closing motivational quotes, which came from one of our feminist theorist philosopher, Carol Gilligan, which she said, women defense is rooted not only in their social subordination, but also in the substance of their moral concern. So, yung mga kababaihan daw, yung paggalang ng mga kababaihan, ay nag-uugat hindi lamang sa pagpapasakop natin sa lipunan. Yung we not just yung we voluntarily subordinate to the society, but also to the substance of moral na in a moral concern, yung moral na pagmamalasakit natin when it comes to the good and ordinance, no, and for the betterment of our society, and to make it short, no, in a layman's term, and na tayo mga babae, kahit yung sinasabi nila na we are complicated, but more so we are women of or people of peace, where we always think what is good and what is peaceful for the thought of others. That is why we always subordinate, no, or lagi tayong handa na magpasakop in whatever ways that we know also that it is right and good for us. And yun nga, we don't just surrender ourselves to what is not good, but we surrender ourselves for what is good for all. And I think that's where peace comes in. So for that, thank you, and God bless. Have a good day.